Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the official position of the organization. Good afternoon, pioneers of change. I am 𝑦𝒂𝒓𝒂𝒏𝒚, your host for the second episode of Foolproof 101. In the previous episode, we had a roundtable discussion with our fellow student leaders regarding issues that have dominated the social media since the pandemic started. They shared their insights as well as their perspectives on issues such as online learning, mental health, and even the administration's response to the pandemic. In this episode, however, we will be going into the various impacts of the pandemic in the Philippines. We will be identifying the problems and analyzing them. Hopefully, by the end of the discussion and with the help of our guest speakers, we will be able to offer solutions to these problems. So, for our wonderful panel of speakers, we have the founder and the president of Inavet Nutrition Technologies Incorporated and chairman of Foodlink Advocacy Cooperative, Dr. Narciso Intal. Good afternoon po. President of 5RS Agriventures Incorporated, Mr. Rudy Silverio. Good afternoon, Mr. Silverio. The CEO of Likecash Asia and the Pacific Corporation and lead convener of the Global Filipino Nation, Mr. �victor_Barrios. Good afternoon po. The CEO of Philtrack Incorporated and of the Trackway Consortium, Mr. Francisco 𝒂𝒂𝒓𝒄𝒂 Jr. Good afternoon, Mr. 𝒂𝒂𝒓𝒄𝒂. The chairman of the Philippine Agriculture and Fisheries Guarantee Funds Incorporated and of the Kapisanan ng Magsasaka, Mr. Sonny Domingo. Good afternoon, Mr. Domingo. And finally, Tiax's Business Development Manager for Asia Pacific, Mr. Jeremil Raton. Good afternoon, Mr. Raton. Of course, this discussion wouldn't be complete without a moderator. The current Vice Chair of the Center for Philippine Futuristic Studies and Management, we are delighted to have as our moderator, LPUPAIR's very own advisor, Mr. Guillermo Santos. Good afternoon, Mr.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Oh,
Yeah.
good afternoon.
Hi. Yeah.
All right, to our dearest audiences, our esteemed speakers and moderator, remember, facts only, fools not allowed. Sir Hale, take it away.
Okay. We are in a situation now where the world is it's an economic, let me use what newspaper people would say. The world is in a mess because of this pandemic. And before we proceed with our speakers, with our authoritative resource people, let me give you the latest that we got from BBC, from CNN, from the networks, the international networks, from the Indian news, from the Australian, from the Japanese, from the German, from the French, and the US. Now, what is the latest? There is a second wave, the second strain, a mutant of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is much more aggressive. It spreads much more faster. And it is deadlier, So therefore, at this point in time, it can dislocate any other plans that are already in place for the recovery. And as a result, you now have, because the second strain, the new strain of the COVID-19 was shown first in England. In the UK, there is now a total ban on travelers from the United Kingdom. And Japan is the latest. This afternoon, Japan just said, no way are there going to be any travelers into Japan from the UK. The US has not yet banned travelers from there, but most of Europe has already done that, and even South Africa. So, without further ado, I am going to give you Mr. 𝒂𝒓𝒊𝒈𝒐 because he's an international banker and is a consultant of the World Bank. Victor, please tell us the total impact of the COVID worldwide and the Philippines and the recovery, the path to the recovery.
Okay.
Vic?
Okay. I'll talk about the economic impact of the pandemic in generic terms all over the world, in the Philippines, and the path to recovery. So you have the first image on the left and the right image on potential recovery. Now, what's the impact? The damage is done to the generating capacity to turn out GDP. What is GDP? GDP is the sum of C, consumption, personal consumption expenditures, investments, government expenditures, and the trade sector. Personal consumption expenditures account for about 70% before the pandemic. Investments around 10%, government around 20%. The trade sector, export minus imports, is minus 5%, meaning we are contributing to the GDP of the rest of the world and its negative impact on us. So, what has happened? What do you think has been the decline in personal consumption expenditures? Is it only 6%? It's very steep. So, given that the weight is 70%, the devastating um, impact on GDP in different countries all over the world, the Philippines is terrific. So you have loss of job. Your investments are anemic. No more investments except digital healthcare, government expenditures. They've run out of money. Make up for the build, but that's one shot. It doesn't increase really GDP in the long run. When that's over, then there's a big hole in the GDP, in the welfare of the country. The trade sector, that's where the potential growth could be with the right policy. Now, what is the systemic disruption? All business models are out of the window. Wherever you have people interacting with each other, the business models are out. So people people who talk about recovery right away in place won't happen. Because the business models have changed significantly for all sectors, financial institutions, enterprises, and the like. So
Vic,
you
let
have
me interrupt Vic just 1 minute. In short, what you're saying is the world and the Philippines is in its worst economic situation all time low, right?
worse than the 1930s relative to the US.
Is it is costing the Philippines 2.2 trillion pesos damage total, while our 2021 budget is 4.3%, 4.3 trillion pesos. So that's more than 50%.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vic.
So, yeah, correct. It's going to drag it down. And then there have been reports that the official estimate of the decline in GDP for 2020 is minus 6%. Would you believe that? Anyway,
Yeah.
there will be there is increasing widespread poverty and it will get worse. And then multilateral aid from the World Bank and even IMF and bilateral agencies will shrink because they themselves are hurting. So,
Mhm.
what's the risk? Civil disturbances, crimes of property crimes, and the rise of authoritarian governments. Now, and this will embolden the CCP.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, let me talk to about the Philippine banking system disruption. That's micro.
Okay. Yeah.
There
Go
is
ahead.
a terrific disruption of the brick and mortar operations. Loans and deposits can no longer grow because people don't want to go to the branches, and even if they do, the staffing is very minimal. It takes days and days to get transactions. We tried to we tried to transfer funds from land bank to one of the other bank. It's been taking 1 week, 2 weeks, just a small amount. So that's disrupted. Inefficient servicing of loans and deposits, then staffing limitations. So you have a shrinkage of the and quality deterioration of the credit portfolios because many borrowers cannot pay, except perhaps the telcos and the like that are raking it in. So, and yet the banks are loaded with banking infrastructure, which is expensive. They cannot get rid of them overnight. So their profitability will be impaired and their credit rating will be tarnished. Okay. Now, there is evolution, what I call Darwinism, in reinventing the Philippine banking system. Well, fortunately, BSP had a circular last year, circular 940 for agent banking, which would allow banks to operate outside the branches. They can do loan applications, approvals, disbursements, repayments, deposit opening, money deposit, deposit withdrawal. What are branches for anyway? Branches largely are for deposit generation and withdrawal, right? But you don't need the brick and mortar. So the, agents can do that. But this will take a little time. In addition, the agents can do telco loads, bill payments, remittances. So could address the disruptions of brick and mortar operations. Now, the banks themselves seem to be very slow and uh, concerned about their present operation, preventing the operation from imploding. Now, the more enlightened banks could go into digital banking, not pure digital banking, hybrid digital and brick and mortar banking. What do I mean by and mortar there? It could be a rural bank with branch, and then digital banking in terms of generating deposits online through their agents remotely. It, it addresses the disruptions of brick and mortar. In fact, in the over the medium and long term, this type of banks would prosper even more than the large banks that have 1,000 branches and the like. And this is also superior to pure digital reading the newspapers. Congress is trying to limit the pure digital banking numbers. So, and stipulating a minimum of several billion pesos of capital. You don't need that if you just have one branch rural bank. They can do it. You know. Okay.
But Vic, let me ask you one question to interrupt you a little bit. Does that not mean that the big banks are going to be having the cutting edge over the smaller banks, unless the small banks uh, uh, consolidate themselves, the small guys, get to be a group so that they can pool their resources and be much more active. Otherwise, you will have the usurers. You have the Chinese usurers going around, and the 5, 6 operators.
Yeah, that sounds logical. But the big banks are bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot collect as much as they can, so they're providing huge amounts for bad loans. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so how can they get rid of the bleeding? They're stuck with their huge infrastructure and the huge staffing. You know, whereas the small guys, the Davids, do not have that burden. So, but they can survive in the meantime and grow from there. You know, so um,
But Vic, isn't the central bank there to regulate all this so that there is no addition to the poor of the poorest? Otherwise, we will be creating more poverty than solving the poverty problem.
Yeah, okay, fine. The BSP can only provide prudential regulation. They cannot stipulate or dictate, you do this, you do that. No,
Mm-hmm.
the banks have to do it themselves. So,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying, for the banks to survive and grow, they must be lean. Their operations must be lean so that they are not burdened by uh, loan write-offs, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of HR expenses and digital expenses to the IPs and all that. You know, the 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 six the 5-6 Bombay are still
Mm-hmm.
gonna be there. But then if you have agent banking and the banks seem to be sleeping on this, uh, are prosper, this could be a viable alternative to the 5-6. 5-6 is at
Uh,
least 72% per annum. Whereas agent
mm-hmm.
banking, you do you do legitimate commercial banking off off site, but the
Mm-hmm.
cost would be very minimal. In fact, you can open an account with costs near asymptotic to zero, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and have a minimum balance of 0 or 100 pesos. Whereas banks cannot do that, you know. Okay, so
Okay.
this is a possible route. Okay, what's the path to a vigorous recovery? Um, one prognosis is V shape. No, that's not going to happen. If your generating capacity has been damaged, you cannot have a
Yeah.
V shape. You know,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
the economy
Understandable.
goes down and
Yeah.
then up right away. And then the other thing is U shape, which is just an extended of V. No, it's not going to happen. So you have also a W shape, which is you go down and then try to recover, then down again, then recover. Perhaps so. But what I'm postulating is a shape. You see that lavender curve, which is the shape of a boomerang. So you have
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
economy going down, and then over time, while the different sectors are reinventing themselves, will take time to recover. For example, tourism. How long will it
Mm-hmm.
take the tourism to recover? Not overnight. They're probably the last sector to recover. You know. What about schools? Schools.
Well, the schools in the Philippines now are suffering, especially the private schools, because the enrollments have gone down, and because the state colleges and universities have offered free enrollment to
Yeah.
the people, the residents in those urban areas. So private education in the Philippines is
Yeah.
down,
And
really. Yeah.
so, how long will it take for the private institutions to recover, given that condition? You know, or name any sector. Name any sector. Transportation, banking, anything. You know, LGUs. Well, LGUs are surviving partly
Hmm.
because of government funding, but not too long. Okay. Um, three road signs to watch out for.
Okay, what are
Number
they?
one, the peso dollar rate should support growth, not weaken it.
Uh,
Number two, the enabling environment should speed up business rebuilding and restructuring. And
hmm.
number three, it's not yet too late. The country could capture a share of the migration of companies out of China. And let me
Okay.
go to some of the details here. Sorry, it's a little cutting.
Okay.
What do I mean by peso dollar rate should support growth? Um, the exchange rate has gone down from about 53 to $1. to about 48, $1. The export sector is bleeding, and
Right, right.
they're pleading. They recall of more than a decade ago, the same thing happened when the exchange rate went down from 55 pesos to 41 pesos, and a lot of exporters, manufacturing companies went bankrupt, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of layoffs, and it took
Mm-hmm.
years to recover those. The same
Mm-hmm.
thing would happen if nothing is done. So the country is proud, with strong peso reflects a strong country.
No.
It's a
Vic,
misnomer.
Will it help if the peso is devalued?
Uh, I that's what the exporters are praying for. So I'll get to that. The
uh,
peso, a strong peso, meaning um, low peso to dollar rate, increases the cost of production and make our
mm,
producers and exporters uncompetitive. So
mm,
less
mm,
pesos means for the OFWs and their families who account for more than half of the population, they're being squeezed.
mm,
So
mm.
a strong peso makes the country weaker, the
Yes,
poor
yes,
poorer, and the rich richer. Uh,
yeah.
why? The property holders, property developers get richer, huh?
Mm.
Whereas the poor get poorer. How do we get
Well,
out of this?
let
By
me add so-
creating, huh?
let me add something, Vic. You see, Vietnam now is very successful because they devalued their currency, and they're now
Yes,
controlling it. They're now controlling it so that it does not overspill and it does not bottom out, you know.
correct, correct,
So,
correct. Yes,
mhm,
yes. But we shouldn't advertise that because it is a beggar thy neighbor policy,
yeah, yeah.
which is
Okay.
unpopular. But then
Okay.
going to South Korea in the 60s, that was their deliberate policy. Every
Hmm.
week, the won would depreciate. No. So if we have a policy climate that weakens the peso, not to
Hmm.
devalue it,
Yeah, yeah.
policy climate, then that will promote growth. Then
Ah.
the exporters could
Mm,
survive, manufacturers would survive, there'll be greater employment in that sector.
mm.
And rather than negative trade sector, you could have a more positive trade sector that will
Okay.
lift the other
Mm.
components of GDP. Okay? Now,
Okay. Go
how will
ahead.
that happen?
Mhm.
Prepaid dollar loans. If the government prepays dollar loans, that will create a demand for dollars, so the peso would somewhat weaken. But
Mhm.
they're doing the opposite. They're borrowing more dollars, you know,
Mhm.
taking advantage of the strong peso, and then also implement import components of build projects. That would again provide the same climate. And then
Meaning, Vic, if you keep on building, you will have to keep on borrowing also. That will be extending the country's treasury, right?
no, no, I mean there are import components of the build program
Yes.
that could be
Mm.
implemented. The import components would strengthen the dollar and weaken the peso. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Now, okay,
Go ahead.
fine.
Mm.
So a weak peso is good for everybody. A weak peso will not fuel inflation. Okay.
Now,
Okay. They speed up
go ahead.
moratorium on corporate loan foreclosure to allow business enterprises to build and restructure, sustain the BSP forbearance. In other words, hinay-hinay lang. In fact, the
Mm-hmm.
BSP has already moved the goalposts. Uh, the classification of bad loans has changed to make the banks
Mm-hmm.
look more healthy. And SEC proactive collaboration of foreclosure. And
Mm-hmm.
then I will outline here. what can be done to attract companies out of China into the Philippines. Kung lelet naman
Okay.
tayo, walang ginagawa. Talk, talk,
Mhm.
talk, but nothing happens. Anyway, it's not hopeless. Something
All
can be
right.
done. Okay,
All
that's
right.
it.
Oh, that's it. Okay. So
Thank you.
the road is not smooth, but for every chaos there is opportunity. Just a matter of having a clear mind and going through it. Now, what we see in these developments is that in the last several months, because our lockdown has been since last March, there is only one sector that had a positive growth, although it shrunk, no? And that is agriculture. Agriculture grew not minus but plus 1.6%. 1.6%. And it's the only roaster. Let me call now on Sunny Domingo, because Sunny is a professional farmer himself and has been through as a newsman and as a uh, seller of fertilizer before. Okay, now, what is your solution? What is your solution amid all this? Sunny, would you please come in, Sunny?
Yeah, maganda po yung nasabi ni Mr. Barrios. Very revealing. Kung sa English sabi nila, dark clouds are are on the horizon. But for the agriculture sector, this will be our golden era or golden years. Everybody will be having problems with their business, but the farmer, when converted into a businessman, is the only one that could possibly bring growth and be a prime mover to the rural economy and of course the general economy. Yan po yung pinupunterya ni Secretary Dan ngayon, and he has identified 8 paradigm shift, but the more important one which he would like to implement and focus on for 2021 is the cluster and farm consolidation approach of assisting our farmers. Hindi na individual farmer. They will now get assistance from the government by the millions and by the billions if they cluster themselves and consolidate themselves. There are some statistics, but I think everybody is aware of the statistics of our declining growth in agriculture. But of course, it's the only one that's growing now. There is statistics on the 9% share of agriculture in the GDP, down from 11% in 5 years ago, and with 60% going to the service sector, nawawala na yung service sector. So therefore, what we would like to see is that agriculture will take care of the 60%, and the rest can take care of the other parts of the gross domestic product. Yeah,
When
just
you
to
say
shorten. Yes.
consolidate, how do you go about it?
Yeah, this basically providing solution to everything. First, we consolidate by getting the farmers to cluster, their cooperatives to cluster, and make
Mhm.
themselves into a cooperative or a corporation. And then we provide them the farm credit needed. If they need 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, 20 million, or even 1 billion, or 800,000 per hectare just to irrigate and have their own rice mill, or maybe 400,000 hectares to just irrigate, and they take care of farming out the milling, because there are a lot of rice millers that are now going bankrupt also. So these are the formulas that we can get into. Eventually, we would now have what we call Get Smart Farms. The Get Smart Farms is basically the acronym of the green energy technologies, because this time we will enter the rural area with our own power plant from the rice husk.
But where
One,
but where will you get the money?
Well, I'll get into that. Where will the money
Okay.
come from? Maybe
Yeah.
Mr. Barrios can help us with an answer into that.
Okay.
With the 15 billion every year that is budgeted to the DA, and another 10 billion that is coming from the Rice Liberalization Act to mechanize the farms and subsidize the seeds and the fertilizers. That's where part of the money is coming in. But it is not really enough to generate the rural economy. Like, for example, you are only helping 2 out of 10 farmers with the present budget that we have. Now, if we can get investors into agriculture, because it is the only area where your money can really grow, this time we can claim that money really grows on trees if we do the right thing. Now, with clustering and consolidation, of course, we can hire professional managers. With professional managers, because we can already control our our managed credit. We can manage the credit and we can control our resources, and we can double the yield, and we can reduce the cost and be competitive.
Let me
So
ask you
we are,
one question,
yes,
Sunny. Let me interrupt. but
yeah.
the average Filipino farmer is reputed to be uh, unwanting or rejecting any change, any modernization, because this is what he has learned from his forefathers and the people before him in the field. Therefore, does he not need any training, any upgrading of the human resource?
Yeah, the
Okay.
problem is the solution actually.
Uh-huh.
We will now provide say 100 farmers with one licensed agriculturist. That will now provide him the technology that is needed. We will train him to become his own farm manager of his own farm. We will use
Mm,
his land and get a 30% share on the production. And therefore, the farmer will not complain and will join. Because
mm,
without borrowing money, he gets 30% for every 100 bags that we produce on 1 hectare of land. We can now produce 200 bags. And we are now reversing the process. We are now um, carrying the burden of managing the farm for the farmers, the
mhm,
burden of getting him the credit and the loan, the burden of getting him the market, and the burden of introducing to him a paradigm shift from transplanting rice with hand to a
mhm,
transplanter,
mhm,
and harvesting his crops before the typhoons come in. We are now converting him from a seasonal farmer that is subsistent to a continuous farming approach, whereby we plant 10 hectares every day in every module of 1,000 hectares, helping
mhm,
1,000 farm families, and
mhm.
harvesting 10 hectares a day, so that even if the typhoon comes in, the crop insurance, which is now subsidized by the government anyway, will take care of the losses. So we are looking at the bright future with the way forward of Secretary Dar on this, and with the help of our farmers participating, and they cannot say no to this, because now if they borrow money, they most often they lost money, because the price of palay is always uncompetitive to the imported rice. Imagine,
Yes, yes.
you can import, the trader will buy palay at a certain price, and he can already import at a certain price bigas na. So
Mm,
there must be a way by which we can make the farmer competitive, and this is what we call the Get Smart Farms. The green energy technology coming in, rice has converted into 1 megawatt power plant, supplying power to 1,000 water pumps. Each farmer has a water pump, doesn't have the labor. So the
mhm.
farmer just have to supervise his own farm. And like you said, we just train them to be supervisors and not farmers anymore. We now
And they still
graduate
own their
them,
land. And they
and they
still own
still
their
own the
land.
land. Yeah, they will
Uh-huh.
manage their own land. They will not lose their land. In fact, we
Mhm,
can pay for the we can pay land bank on their share of the income, because this will now be inclusive. So for every 100 million peso that we earn on a 1,000 hectare level, because we have projected that we earn a net of 400 million pesos. half of that goes to the farmer, and half of it can pay the loan. And in 3 months, 3 years, 4, 5 years with a grace period, we can pay back the loan, and we can pay land bank, and land bank can even provide us a better deal on borrowing money from them. So we are creating now jobs for the farmers that would go back to the farm, because we will now be hiring them as our farm workers. And if we
Yes.
have the power plant, we can put up the processing plant, so that it will hire the children of the farm workers. The farm workers just have to supervise. Then we create a market for for, like what Mr. Barrios is saying, a market even for the big banks. The big banks should now be approaching us. We should not be asking anymore and begging from the big banks if they want to turn their money into green gold, like, yeah.
Okay, Sonny, if we get somebody, for example, with extra investable funds, and he asks for project studies or a pilot project area in the Philippines, is there one or two that we can show?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been shown by the Marcos government when he declared 𝒂𝒓𝒊𝒂𝒏 requiring all corporations that are profitable to either import expensive rice or grow it themselves, buy their own land, hire their own agriculturists, or link with farmers. And we did that with Meralco Core Farm. They link with the farmers take the risk. And the Meralco Core Farm became a big, had a big farming corporation.
But is there any one plant and any one area now that's doing that?
Okay, so that's history. Marcos made the Green Revolution ongoing. Of course, the whole of 𝑽𝒂𝒂𝒓𝒄𝒂 is ongoing. They harvest every time, they plant every day, and they harvest every day. And the rice mills are always running 24/7. So we don't have to put up a 1,000 hectare module to prove that it works. But I know this works because I started in my barangay. I was the first farmer that bought a tractor and mechanized my own farm and did not transplant anymore. I developed the broadcast seeding technology, where now I can use the drone. Before, I had to buy a spreader, and all the technologies are now available to make farming easier.
I see that what you're driving at is we now trigger, or we now prime the trigger in the mind of the farmer to modernize. In short,
Yes, yeah,
he has to do it himself in an initiative. But my question is, our land, our soil has been subjected to a lot of chemical fertilizers for the last 50 years. You yourself was once upon a time a seller of fertilizers from Stanvac, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, my next question is, if you're through, I was going to call on NARS, Dr. NARS Intal,
okay. So
to go on with that.
Yeah, let me present further a little, so that it will open up Dr. NAR's entry into this area.
Okay.
Now, before you plant anything, you have to correct your soil, neutralize your soil, because our soils are now toxic. I was part of the Ace Compton advertising that converted with SPAC. I'm sure Mr. Barrios knows that, and Mr. Yuseco must have been. So we converted the million rice farmers from natural farming to chemical farming. Now it's been, 40 years, and the soil are now toxic. And so we have to start with the soil condition. That's why we call it smart farms. Systematic, modernized, appropriate rural technology for farmer sustainability. So therefore, what is appropriate? Appropriate is applying the right kind of fertilizer. Appropriate is rehabilitating your soil. Appropriate is mechanizing. Appropriate is getting the right credit. Appropriate is getting the right market. Appropriate is basically helping the farmers not to be farmers anymore, but basically farmer entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you for the opportunity you have given me on this.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much, Sonny. Now let me call on NARS, Dr. NARS Intal. Go ahead.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Ako po isang veterinaryo, hindi po ako doktor sa agrikultura. Hindi rin po ako graduate ng BS Agriculture. Like Commissioner Domingo, I'm a veterinarian by profession. My task this afternoon is large-scale soil rehabilitation plan or a soil health restoration using quantum growth microglyph technology. It is the way forward for reversing climate change while enhancing food and nutrition security.
How does that happen? Go ahead.
Pardon. Yeah. My discussion will be centered on 5 parts. 1, how important is our soil health restoration to us, to man and climate? What is soil health? Second, I'll touch a brief evolution of agricultural practices and the major issues in the current agricultural practices or models. Third, I will cite 5 basic principles for soil health restoration in the ecosystem from the perspective of a producer, from Mr. Gabe Brown, a successful organic producer from the United States. Second, 5 principles too formed from the perspective of an agroecology scientist and a soil microbiologist, my mentor, Dr. Christine Jones, a PhD graduate. Number 3AB, adopting tools of science-based, modern, innovative technologies. This is the quantum growth microglyph technology, as you can see right on your screen. Quantum growth, harnessing nature's energy. And last of my topic is an amazing story of a rice farmer who conducted 4 successive years of rice trials with a good impact attributed to growth, to quantum growth technology. How important is soil health to man and climate? And what is soil health? Soil health is the continued capacity of soils to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. If we have a healthy soil, therefore, we will have healthy plants. If we have healthy plants, we have healthy people. If we have healthy people, we have a healthy nation. According to our dear Secretary, William Darr, restoring soil health is very crucial, and it's imperative to abundant harvests and high profits for our farmers. The United Nations General Assembly declared in the year 2015 as the International Year of Soils. This initiative is aimed to raise awareness worldwide on the important roles that soils play in slowing climate change, in securing food supply, and enhancing plant diversity. Indeed, healthy soil is ever more important in our warming climate as it increases the adaptive capacity of plants to withstand the extreme weather conditions and lessening crop failures. Thus, healthy soil helps address the challenges of feeding the planet's ever-growing population that is estimated to increase to 9.6 billion people by the year 2050. Healthy soil is also essential in the fight to end malnutrition, particularly in rural areas. I will cite a brief revolution or evolution of agricultural practices. In the last 65 years, the so-called Green Revolution has swept across the globe, with agriculture becoming mechanized, and traditional inputs are replaced by fossil fuel-based inputs. Under the Green Revolution, agriculture uses high-yielding varieties and hybrid seeds, farm machineries, irrigation waters, and pesticides. And as chemical inputs are fossil fuel-based, and machines also use fossil fuels to run, the industrialization of agriculture is energy intensive with a high carbon footprint.
Yun.
Energy-wise, it takes 10 calories of energy to produce 1 calorie of food in modern agriculture, as opposed to 1 calorie of sunlight energy to produce 2 calories of food in the pre-Green Revolution area. The evolution of agricultural practices in the Green Revolution era were focused on irrigation technologies, on genetic modified manipulations of organisms, on chemical pest controls, on usages of synthetic fertilizers, and lately monocultures and intensive tillage. The major issues, therefore, in our current situation, these years, agricultural practices are experiencing modern agricultural models which have been used during the Green Revolution.
May I
First,
interrupt you?
yes,
Nars, may I interrupt?
yes.
You're talking about soils only, but water is very important. Without water,
Yes.
you know, yung bang mga quantum growth, meron ding gamot para sa tubig?
Definitely, it conserves water, soil,
Kasi,
soil
let me-
carbon.
let-
when you
let
have
me-
a high soil carbon content and good soil health, we conserve water, and it absorbs 10 times its weight. And
Kasi
that's
nga,
a fact. That's
Nars,
science.
Kasi Nars, no? Meron akong nabasa sa DNR last week that the 400 river systems in the Philippines, kakaunti lamang ang pure, kakaunti lamang ang walang pollutants na nanggagaling sa mga factories, nanggagaling sa plastic, na napupuno ng plastic.
Industrialized
Industrialized.
businesses.
And not only that,
Yes.
with pollutants from human waste products, because of the lack of real master planning and land use in the developments of all these urban areas. Yung urbanization, mabilis eh. Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
So, meron ka rin dyan para sa tubig, ha?
Yes. As I told you yesterday, this is a very big subject, environmental stewardship, which we can talk about in the succeeding discussions, Professor Hill.
Okay.
And right now, we will focus, because of my time frame, I'll just focus on the technology later.
Okay. Sige. Okay.
Yeah. I will continue the major issues being used by the modern agriculture models or systems. First, we are still in the excessive tillage and high chemical inputs. Second, we are still practicing monocropping. Third, the modern agriculture now uses water intensively. Fourth, we are overly dependent on chemical inputs. And last, the fifth, we are energy dependent and intensive in fertilizer manufacturing. Okay, I'll go now on two regenerative.
How many more minutes? How many more minutes do you have?
I think mga 5. I don't know.
Oh, sige. Okay.
Sorry.
Five.
5. I will cite a holistic regeneration of the healthy ecosystem from the producer's perspective. He cited 5 fundamental actions. 1, the least amount of mechanical disturbance, no till. 2, armor on the soil surface, protecting the soil surface. 3, diversity in the cropping system. There must be no monocultures. Plants, animals, insects must go together in an environment. 4th, there must be living roots in the ground as much as possible throughout the year. And last, animal impact or integration. Yeah, it's a combination.
Oh.
Now, from the perspectives of a well-known soil microbiologist and an agroecologist by the name of Dr. Christian Jones, an Australian amazing carbon scientist. Her recommendations were centered on 5 principles. Number 1, harnessing nature's energy. And that is the sunlight energy through the process of, or the miracle process of photosynthesis.
Okay.
In short, that is plant. And green, and greening is good. And year-long greening is even better because every year, photosynthesis draws down hundreds of billions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And the movement of carbon from the atmosphere to soils via the green plants represent the most powerful tool we have at our disposal for the restoration of soil function and reduction in atmosphere levels of carbon dioxide. While every green plant is a solar-powered carbon pump, it is the photosynthetic capacity and the photosynthetic rate of living plants rather than biomass, than their biomass, that drive the biosequestration of stable soil carbon. Photosynthetic capacity, therefore, is the amount of light intercepted by green leaves in a given area. And on the other hand, photosynthetic rate is the rate at which plants are able to convert light energy to sugars. Just as he said, if you can see the soil, it is losing carbon. It is also losing nitrogen because, as we all know, they go together. Carbon, nitrogen ratio.
Yeah. Let me
Number
add something
2.
to that.
Yes,
Let me add
yes.
something to that.
Yes.
It should be, I'd like to simplify one point there. Because
All right.
if you have green, if you have trees, if you have
Yes.
leaves,
Yes.
they emit oxygen,
Yes.
which man
exactly.
needs, and
Yes.
man
Purified.
and man emits carbon dioxide, which the plant needs. So it is a symbiotic relationship.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's how you balance ecology.
Yeah, that is
harmony.
That is the interconnectedness of
Okay.
everything ba. Okay,
Oh.
can I continue, sir? Can I continue?
Yeah, go ahead. 2 more minutes. Yeah.
2 more.
Sige.
Okay. Number 2 cardinal principle she cited. Very important. Microbes matter. We are embedded in a microbial world, ladies and gentlemen, all gentlemen.
Hindi virus, huh?
Hindi virus.
Oh, sige.
We are 99% a consortium of bacteria, you know, and we are called by the terms soil microbiome or genomes. And what is the soil food web? What is the soil food web? It is the solution approach to regenerate our soils. And it is an essential component of a healthy ecosystem. It is an incredible diversity of organisms, just like in quantum growth that make up the soil food web. Their sizes range from the tiniest one-celled organisms to algae, to fungi and protozoan, to the more complex nematodes and microarthropods, to larger visible earthworms, insects, small vertebrates, and we, on top of the 5 trophic levels, man is part of the soil food web. So therefore, the soil food web is a community of living organisms, living all and part of the soil. The soil food web contains a series of conversions of energy and nutrients as organisms consume one another.
And in the final analysis, man, the most intelligent of all animals, is the destroyer of his own environment.
Destroyer, yeah.
Okay. I have one question before I go to the next one.
Yeah.
Kung ako ay isang magsasaka, or di kaya I am a student in the college and I want to shift to agriculture, what is my incentive? Kung gagamit ba ako ng quantum growth, ganong kadami ang babalik sa akin?
Okay, that is an amazing question.
Kasi bibili ako ng quantum growth, di ba?
Translating, yeah. Translating.
Paano babalik sa akin yun?
Yeah. We have computed the return to investment ratio is up to 300%.
Huh? 300?
Yes. Yes. 300%. Yeah. Later, I will show to you the rice story of Mr. Pangan, wherein he was able to harness 13.1 tons of palay in his 1.1 hectares. Can you imagine? 262 kabans, harnessing 13.1 kabans.
Yeah.
What is the national average of price? It is 4 or less.
Yeah.
Now, baka wala na ngayon kasi nagbaha-baha tayo. Okay, number 4. Limit chemical use. The mineral cycles improve significantly when soils are alive. No amount of NPK fertilizers can compensate for compacted, lifeless soil with low wettability and low water holding capacity.
Okay.
So let's avoid inorganic phosphorus. Let's avoid inorganic potassium or inorganic nitrogen. Okay? So if I may proceed to the last cardinal, it is animal integration. It should be a multitude of animal species who are in contact with the soils prior to agricultural intensification. Okay, I have to cite in summarization the quantum technology facts for easier understanding. The quantum growth microglyph technology is a breakthrough in modern microbiology that provides revolutionary plant enhancements through the combination of cutting-edge developments in novel biotechnologies and biophysics.
Okay.
The quantum growth series is the result of a unique partnership in agricultural technology. The quantum growth is the new paradigm in Philippine agriculture. It is a national soil health movement like the Inang Lupa movement, wherein the founder is our commissioner, Sunny Domingo.
How long have we been using quantum growth?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Mainly on the inception stage. It is a national soil health movement for regenerative farming and a strategy for the inclusive Philippine agri-industrialization to attain our 4 sustainable development goals: food sufficiency, economic security, nutritional security, and environmental security. The quantum growth is a soil revolution in plant growth and yield enhancement. The quantum growth technology strictly adheres to the 4 fundamental principles of biological farming. The principle on health, ecology, fairness, and care.
Okay.
The quantum growth, 1 minute. Well, the quantum product technology background, they are revolutionary. They have a full spectrum microbiome. They are novel biological ecosystem solutions. They are categorized as amendment or beneficial soil and plant inoculants. The quantum growth do not contain chemical products. They do not contain compost. They are not GMOs. They are not synthetic amino acids. I have to cut short my discussion, wherein to give way to our friend who will be next to ano. And I'll just be answering questions on emails.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. All these previous speakers that we have, 3, have given us their own solutions to the problems that we have now. However, we cannot exclude one factor in all this, and this is transportation, because you have to move people and goods at the same time. Without transportation, there will be no mobility. No mobility, there is no socio-economic activity. That's that is basic, you know. We will be going back to the caveman. So I'm going to now ask an old friend, Francis Yuseco Jr., to talk about his solution to our transportation problem. Sige, you have, Francis.
Okay,
you have 10 minutes. How do you want to solve it?
Well, actually, it's not a very complicated problem. It's really a simple problem that can be provided with a simple common sense solution. Okay. Now, for any country in the world to economically, efficiently, and continuously progress socially, politically, and economically, you need a nationwide logistical backbone. Okay. Right. Now, the traditional thinking is that this logistics backbone has to be rail-based. Kailangan naka-rail-less na gulong na bakal. Okay. But what makes a railway system operationally efficient? It's not because it's running on rails, but because it's track-based. Meron sariling trackway, di ba? There are 3 words in railroad track: the rail, the road, and the track. Okay. But that operative word is the track, is the trackway. No? Ang thinking kasi ng mga kailangan naka-train yan di ba? But the word train comes from the Latin word trahere. Ang ibig sabihin nito, hilahin. Okay? Ngayon, wala naman batas o simbahan nagsasabi, kailangan paghilahin mo kailangan nakagulong na bakal Tapos, kung tumatakbo sa riles, di ba? Meron akong strategic partnership na ngayon sa DOST, no? Gumagawa na sila ng sarili nating road train. Gulong na goma. Okay? Road train na ang inaano na namin hindi lang for passengers but also for agri fisheries and other cargo products, refrigerated and unrefrigerated. Okay.
Ganong kahaba yan?
We will start with as short as 20 meters hanggang 40 meters yung haba. Okay. Ngayon, meron na kaming kasulatan na agreement ng Panay Railways na yung co-convert namin na decommission Panay Railways 35 years, we will convert it into what we call our patented digital trackway. Patented to kasi may software to In other words, because we're already in the information technology, we can, through our software, we can monitor, manage, and control all the rolling stocks. Yung speed nila, yung distance nila between each other, you know. So tumatakbo to. Ang Panay Railways, including ang ultimate target namin talaga is the PNR, no? ang Panay Railways has a right of way of 30 meters. Ang kailangan lang naman bawat trackway, ang tawag dito trackway, no, is 3.7 meters per trackway. No? Pero ito hindi namin lalagay sa gitna. Kasi pagka railways siya, you need a what you call a safety zone para kung madidiskarel man yung train, merong safety zone na pupuntahan eh. We don't need that, no. We will be putting the trackways dun sa bawat outermost lane, no. Tapos babakura namin yung outer yung the entire trackway nakabako diyan, no.
So exclusively for the trucks.
Exclusively for the road train and for our trackway system. Walang iba makakagamit. Parang train, parang naka-release train, exclusive naman for rail trains eh. Pero ito, nakagulong yung goma. Diba?
At saka hindi naantala yung takbo, no?
Hindi naantala. At saka ang maganda rito, 87% less expensive, 5 years faster to produce. At lahat gawa sa Pilipinas, halos lahat. Okay. So halimbawa, the 3.7 nakabako diyan. Meron ka pang 22 meters sa gitna. Okay, yung gitna na yan, lalagay namin mga agro-industrial complexes, retirement villages, schools, hospitals, yung mga informal settlers, let's say sa national center natin, no? Yung mga Metro Manila, mga 600,000 yan. Pwede natin ilipat yan in a master planned environment. We're also tied up with the School of St. Benil, urban planning eh. So dyan natin lilipat yung mga informal settlers natin. No? Tapos, ang maganda rito, ang sinasabi ko, hindi nga lang for passengers to, for cargos, especially agri and fisheries product. No? Kaya nangyari ngayon, between farm gate and sea gate price, pagdating sa urban market, ang diferensya minsan umabot 900, 1,000%. Eh.
Nako.
Okay? Alam naman ni Mr. Sunny Domingo to at saka ni Mr. Rincal, di ba? Saan napupunta ngayon yung diferensya na yung 400 to 900%? Sa millers, biyaheros, illegal checkpoints, at cartelized traders.
Yun.
Kaya yung farmers natin at saka yung mga mangingisda natin, kawawa eh. Yun ang 5 piso nila, pagdating sa urban market, 50 pesos na. So, ating consumer natin, naantala, dihado pareho eh, di ba? So, pag tinanggal natin lahat ng middlemen na yan, because yung road train namin for cargo refrigerated, non-refrigerated, yung magsasaka mismo at saka mangingisda, sila mismo magdadala ng mga produce at saka catch nila sa urban centers. So yung 5 piso nila ngayon, imbis na 5 piso, magiging 20 pesos na.
Ayun.
Tapos yung 50 pesos na binibili natin, magiging 30 pesos na lang. Okay?
That's scientific planning.
Yes. And maganda rito, meron na kung strategic alliance with our own DOST. No? At saka yung Panay Railways, yan ang magagawin naming showcase para pakita na ang Pilipino pala, ang common sense, napaka-common. Basically.
Ngayon, meron akong tanong sa'yo, no?
Sure.
Francis.
Sure.
Sa Mindanao, gagawa ka rin yan.
Mindanao, balak na namin kasi yung matagal na sinasabi, Mindanao Rail. Ang tawag namin, Mindanao Trackway. We can start from Tagum to Cagayan de Oro. No? Pero ano namin, we can do this 87% less cost. Tapos yung downstream effects sa steel, metal, plastic, mirror sa Pilipinas. Terrible. Tapos, at saka yung creation of goods, of jobs, will be continuing. Diba? Pati yung mga OFWs natin, unti-unti natin, pwede pa balikin. Tapos pwede pa natin replicate in other countries. Kasi there are no real systems in the world making money. All of them lose competition. Okay?
And government.
Hindi alam ng mga taxpayers to, sila nag-subsidize ng rate. In the States alone, there are 1,342 abandoned railways. So it's a very, very common sense, practical solution to enable us to continuously, move people and goods It's a simple
All right.
solution. You know.
Now, all we have to do now is push that, no?
Yes,
as
yes.
a solution
We
to
have
the,
signed a MOA with Panay Railways. You know, there's a possibility under this administration, kasi nakipagpulong na rin kami, no, na magawa namin certain portions of the PNR. No? Kasi kung, but specifically, Calamba to Batangas. Kasi kausap na namin si Governor Dodo Mandañas dito. No? Payag siya. Payag siya. Kasi yung Batangas port, medyo tulog di ba? Kung yung Calamba to Batangas, yung trackway na nakatuwangwang lang, nakatuwangwang nako-compromise lang, we will then be able to show, ito pala pwedeng mag-move ng people. Hindi nga nakagulong na baka, gulong na goma.
At saka yung yung dispersal mula ng Manila, ng Port of Manila as an international port.
Yes.
Sa Batangas will now be utilized as the full alternate international port.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because of that.
Yes. Tapos pwede ka maglagay ng mga terminals along
depots.
Along the way. Laguna. Along the way. Di ba? Hindi naman kailangan magsiksikan sa Maynila. Di ba?
Okay.
Tapos we don't need sovereign guarantee and taxpayer subsidy. We don't need. Kaya I will email it to you.
Okay. Sige. All right.
Okay.
Tapos na yan.
Salamat sa inyo.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sige. Thanks very much. Now, all of that now will have to be dependent on how the communities will interact. So let me ask somebody among our group who has experience in government relations and interaction between non-government, private industry, because he has been in private industry for a long time, and in telecommunications, Let me now call on Silver, retired Air Force Captain Silverio. Yeah. Meron akong tanong kay Silver. Silver, are you on?
Yeah, I am on. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. Yang ganyan. What is your solution now because it affords, there is going to be problems. There will be problems. You cannot avoid that. So there are solutions. But the solutions will also require interaction between communities and the national government and the local governments. How do you know? What do you see now? So that, number one, the peace and order situation is now stabilized, no? So that there is no abuse of authority and so forth. In short, there is now harmony because you are going to have more or less a modular type of community development. Meaning, I'm asking you for your interaction between communities, your experience.
Okay. To start with, just let me tell you a little about my background.
Okay.
I am primarily a military gunman, having graduated from the FPMA in 1962. After staying with the Air Force for about 9 years, I joined Ayala Corporation as head of their aviation department. And it was at the time that I remember Bancom was making waves in the corporate world. And I always heard the name of Mr.
Barrios.
Yeah. And also, later on, his Piso Bank. Okay.
Okay.
Well, anyway, after that, I got out of Ayala Corporation. I went on my own, for my own several companies, but basically engaged in the aviation business. And then later on, I was able to join Domestic Satellite Philippines, and DOMSAT, and became a communications guy. So that's where I think I may fit in. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Webinar. Okay. After almost a year, we are starting to see ways to restore the health and the economy of the country. Long-term planning and investments are necessary to enable us to rebuild our community from the ravages brought about by the pandemic. One key lesson learned from this pandemic is that clear and regular communication between the national government and the community contribute to public trust in our government, resulting in improved understanding of responsibilities by the individual and ultimately the community as a whole. The Local Government Code of 1991 provides autonomy to all local governments to enable them to become self-reliant communities and make them more effective partners with the national government in attaining national goals. Under the code, the national government requires all national agencies and offices to conduct periodic consultations with appropriate local government units, as well as non-governmental and people's organizations and other concerned sectors of the community before any project or program is implemented within the respective jurisdictions. Under normal times, the level of government involvement in community development will depend on the community itself. Local governments are supposed to manage community development in their own jurisdictions at all times as provided for
Yes, yes,
by the
yes,
local government code. It
yes.
being a part of their responsibilities to ensure a level of quality for their constituents. However, under a new normal brought about by the pandemic, the national government's involvement is definitely required. Serious issues like building the necessary infrastructure for community development and access to funds and other resources for economic recovery dictates the involvement of the national government.
Mhm.
Community development as well as economic recovery being part of the national government's responsibilities, government officials oftentimes have a higher degree of experience relative to these undertakings. This knowledge can be valuable resource, especially for relatively new communities where their leaders are not sure of their actions, unlike members of the government who do such actions most, if not all of the time, in the performance of their job. The national government's involvement can come in the form of assistance for housing, health services, financial aid, disaster relief, and finances like loans, especially to those who have been most vulnerable to the pandemic. A step further is for the national government to revitalize and reinvigorate the small and mid-sized enterprises or SMEs by providing them with non-interest bearing loans and tax breaks or holidays.
Yun. Go ahead. Yeah.
We know that the private sector is the engine of economic growth. They create jobs, increase trade, provide goods and services to the public at large, and generate tax revenue to fund basic public services such as health and education. The private sector also provides a mix of goods and services to include provision of health services, medicines, medical products, financial products, training for health workers, and information technology. Incentives can also be extended to a level that would help the private sector to continue, restart, or reopen their operations and services, and in the process, provide manpower employment. The public-private partnership, or PPP, involves the collaboration between the government and the private sector. Through the PPP, projects such as the construction and operation of road networks, airports, ports, power, water, and solid waste treatment can be initiated with the least financial exposure to the government, as the risk is primarily passed on to the private sector.
Yeah.
The private sector's participation in community development as well as health and economic recovery of the country is best exemplified by the construction of the international airport in Bulacan, the Skyway network that would ease up the horrendous traffic along the streets of Metro Manila, and the initiative to purchase millions of pesos worth of vaccines for the public without cost to the government. At the local government level, the people in the community, being an integral part of the system, should do what they can do to have a part in improving their community, such as simple task of taking care of their health and following health protocol while the COVID-19 pandemic continues to affect the Philippines. Community members need to be involved, even to a slight degree, in community development for the community's continued progress. Dialogue among the various parts of the community should be encouraged. This will help disseminate information and get feedback from the community. Open communication lines makes it easier for community leaders to assess the effects of their actions on the community and its residents. Social media can also greatly benefit local governments. Social media outlets can help get out important news like school closures, road detours, emergency power outages, floods, fires, and other vital information. Timely and genuine and factual messages through social media can dispel rumors, resolve inaccuracies, and provide a venue for local governments to post rebuttals about important issues.
Not to mention fake news.
Yeah,
Sige.
local governments can also effectively use social media to respond quickly in the event of a crisis or emergency. Communication is important during emergencies, and having a channel like social media to get the truth out of the community helps to keep rumors like false rumors, okay, at bay and helps prevent unnecessary panics. This contributes to the process of creating trust between the national government, the local governments, and the citizenry. At this point, let me state that every time that the government is involved in anything at all, politics rears its ugly head and
Yeah.
becomes a factor to reckon with. Philippine politics, as of late, seems to have a role in any government undertaking, as they usually tend to be tied to people's motivations and actions. There is often a question regarding the involvement of government officials and leaders. Are they doing things out of genuine desire to help, or rather to further their own agenda? We should, however, bear in mind that public support would always go towards what would be beneficial to the majority, especially during these trying times of difficulty brought about by the pandemic.
Yeah.
And closing, I would like to encourage everyone to inculcate in ourselves the spirit of bayanihan. To you, the studentry, the future of our nation rests on your shoulders. That's
Okay.
my presentation.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that. It merely means that, yes, government should be helping people, not helping themselves. Government officials should help the constituents, not themselves. Because, anyway, all this require, however, basic data processing. Because without the basic data processing for development, you cannot have any scientific basis for all your planning. Why? Because you will not have even the number of people that is truly accurate so that you can determine what socio-economic scientists call as the territorial imperatives. Territorial imperatives merely means the capacity, the area that has the capacity to support life and sustain that life, that number of people in that certain area. You know, so that is also the driving power, the driving force between self-national interests, and that is why nation states are required, before they can be sovereign, are required to have the armed forces to defend themselves within their sovereign territory. That is the imperial, that is the territorial imperative, you know. But we now have somebody who can help us uh, in understanding what these data are all about. Now, let me call on Jeremy Raton of TIACSA. Emil, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, sir.
Okay. Could you please explain how you process, how you gather? Because data gathering is an art and a science by itself. You cannot just say, oh, akin na, ilang kamatis yan? 10. Hindi, mukhang hindi 10 yan. Hindi, lagyan mo na lang mga, pagka sinabi mong mga, that is not precise. And data must be precise. Just
That's
like
correct.
mathematics, you know? Pag
Right.
sinabi mong tatlo, hindi tatlo kalate. Ha?
Correct.
So, how do you do that? How do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you train people also how to get data and process it?
Yeah, that is correct, Sir Hill. In fact, due to this COVID-19, we know for a fact that poverty incidence in the Philippines has really risen. No, I think according to the statistics, it's about it increases to 17% and up. And according to our NEDA chief, reducing poverty is still doable. But the question is, how do we measure now poverty?
Yun.
Because the official poverty indicator is actually based on income. And right now, everybody has no income at all. No? Or talaga na-reduce yung income. So, one way is to really find an alternative way to measure poverty. And one way is doing consumption expenditures, which is an alternative measure of poverty because it provides a better and more adequate picture of the well-being and the unmet needs of the bottom poor and the low-income families. And having said this could actually provide relevant and timely information for government policy and program development. In fact, in the NEDA, all the experts says or agrees that policy and data issues, poverty measurement systems, and poverty line setting methodologies have to be addressed to improve the key government interventions. One way that we do it in TIACSA is via using artificial intelligence. And we're building the farmers' futures through data science. No, as mentioned by Sir Hill, how do we get this data? How do we get data from farmers when in fact getting data from farmers is very, very challenging? So, but just to give you an idea first about TIACSA, TIACSA has been in the business for the past 20 years, and we started actually with transactional systems in the telco industry. So we've been doing these transactional systems. We were the ones who, kung alam niyo po yung mga sa Globe and Smart, let's say, pagka naubusan ka ng loads, so we were the pioneers of what we call nano credits. And and starting in 2010, we started using scoring mechanisms, using data and analytics to measure using the mobile data. TIACSA has been in different parts of the world. We've been doing 46 billion transactions processed every year. And we've been analyzing 260 million users using the telco records. So we have different offices. And we're working with mobile network operators, banks, financial entities, and other companies. So what does this mean? TIAXA has been known to process very, very large data sets, no? Billions of data sets, and we call it, we put it in what we call it data lake. And just to give you about an idea about the project on this one, so nearly 80% of the world's poor rely on farming. Everybody knows that. And based on a study, yung agricultural innovations are 3.2 times more effective in alleviating poverty. And in fact, here in the Philippines, I think it's only the agricultural sector has this increase, right?
Right.
For this year alone.
Yeah, 1.6.
Correct. So what we're saying is that data-driven agriculture can boost access and productivity of smallholder farmers. Because, of course, we know for a fact that merong challenges si farmers. Meron din farmers si supplier, right? So si farmer, manghihiram siya sa lender, pero bago pa utangin, ang tagal. And pagka napautang na-miss na niya yung planting season because late na naibigay yung pautang or kaya kulang yung pautang na binigay. Kung on the other side naman, si supplier, sino ba itong mga farmers na to? Sino ba yung totoong farmer? Kasi, just like an example, nasa listahan farmer siya, pero hindi pala siya farmer. So,
nakatira lang pala siya doon.
Correct. So, like, si Doc Nars, who would like to probably provide his quantum growth sa real farmers, hindi niya maibigay sa real farmers because he doesn't know where these real farmers are. So, and we're looking at possibility, or we created this what we call the BRS, or what we call it the business resiliency scoring. So what it does is that it measures the preparedness, the adaptability, and risk mitigation from shocks and stresses of the farmers. So how do we do that? We get all their informations. We have their socio-economic data that includes, of course, all of their profiling nila. May asawa ba? May anak? Member ba?
Ilan ang anak? Yeah.
Correct.
So, nag-aaral ba anak o hindi? O magkano income?
Correct. And then we also see their, what we call, ito nga, yung consumption patterns, like, ano ba binabayaran nila? Loads, kuryente, tubig, insurance. And then, of course, we have all the environment and agronomic data. Now, the challenge here is, how do you get this information from farmers? The solution is, don't get it from farmers. Because farmers don't have this data on their hand. Pagka nagtanong ka sa farmers, definitely, ang bibigyan nila sa iyo yung mga historical data nila, no? But we can see patterns. Like what Kasani mentioned, meron na mga, for example, rice yung tinatanim nila, meron ng patterns yan, meron ng farm management yan. There's already a list of information, of knowledge, no, na pwede nang gamitin. So, what we do is, we automate it, no? What we do is, using all of this information, we target the qualified farmers. And then once we qualify the right farmers, we update their information. Kami na ang gagawa nun. And then once it's updated, bibigyan na natin sa financier or sa mga lending institutions. We get them the right suppliers, like kay Doc Nars, no? We reach the right market, no? And then we reach the right channels. Sino ba yung kooperatiba nandoon, or farmers corporation na nandoon? So using these solutions or this framework, we hope to increase their access to capital, the markets and the information, increase their productivity, as just like what Doc Nars mentioned. We use quantum growth. It can improve the productivity up to 300%, or the yields, no, up to the 300%, right? And with this one, we can help them improve their quality of life. No, they
Yeah.
can now pay additional for their health, for their
Mm.
children's education, and we can contribute to the SDG, no SDG goals of the United Nations. So,
Okay.
so what we're saying is using like this approach, the BRS approach, we can actually hope to reach, no, the bottom poor, because normally hindi sila nare-reach eh. We need data. If we don't have data now, what we do is we get it from alternative data sources. In fact, just to give you an idea, one way to estimate, no, the poverty incidence is using satellite feeds.
Uh,
So we can do that as well. So all of these things, right now, because of this COVID pandemic thing, the way forward really is to digitalize the process. No? Digitalize the process, and of course, delivering good service provided by the government to its citizens through digitalization of services.
okay. Ang isang maidadagdag ko dyan is yung accuracy ng pagkuha ng data, no? Because ang lingwahe, ang salitang Pilipino hindi precise eh. Hindi eksakto. Pag sinabi sa'yo, pag tinanong mo yung farmer, kamusta na ho ngayon ang kita ninyo? Ang inyong income. Sasabihin siya, maganda naman eh. Ano yung maganda? Maganda sa'yo, hindi maganda sa akin. Hindi niya sasabihin na, ngayon andyan kayo. Ang ganda. Yun ang
Correct.
problema. Yun ang problema. Now, yung ating data, the data that we require for processing and to build up para lumaki yung ating basis ng development data so we can plan scientifically and accurately. Kailangan eksakto ang sinasabi, ang ibinibigay na informasyon. Dahil kung hindi po eksakto, mahihirapan yung mga nagpaplano. Kaya ganon. Kaya naman, dun sa ating mga magbukid, ang karamihan dyan, hindi talaga nagpaplano. Tanungin mo dyan tanungin mo sila, ano ang gagawin nyo sa Enero? Bahala na, baka umulan, baka hindi. Baka tagtuyot, o baka naman bumaha. Hindi ko pa alam. Yun.
Yeah.
Hindi niya kinukuha lahat yun.
Yes.
But in planning, you need that. And you need to store that. And you need to monitor it every single week or on a bi-weekly. Basta it is sustained monitoring, then you can have the trajectory. Then you can look at your future. Makikita mo.
Yeah. In fact, Sir Hill, base sa isang pag-aaral sa UPLB, hindi na nila tinatanong kung ano yung crop yield actually ng mga farmers, because dahil nga hindi nga eksakto yung pagsasabi ng mga farmers, ano ba talaga yung kita nila or ano ba yung yield ng production nila. So the use of artificial intelligence plus what we call the Internet of Things sensors, no? We put sensors on the field, would help us define or would help us see what will be the potential yield of that area.
Okay.
That's why it's very important na lahat ng elements ando doon. The soil, the type of the type of crops na tinanim, the weather, and all of these things. Once we combine it, we come up with an algorithm. Now we come up with an algorithm, and we indicate it via this what we call the BRS score. Then it will show na ito talang farmer na to, pautangin mo to kasi malaki ang potential niya na makapag-harvest on this period.
Ngayon, okay. Salamat. Thanks very much, Emil, for all those. No. Now, what we have is something that I'm going to add, especially to students of foreign relations courses and to students of agriculture. Number one, there is an external factor to all this. Meron tayo diyang mga kailangang pag-aralan na hindi dito natin makukuha. Makukuha lang natin yan doon sa mga sources of information sa ibang bayan or doon sa news items na lumalabas sa networks, sa mga malalaking kumpanya na nakapagbibigay ng balita on time, on real time. Because if you are going to rely on government for data, I am going to assure you, and I have more than 60 years of experience in that, the government bureaucracy itself is not up to give you something that is current and accurate data because of the culture, because of the imprecise language that most of them use, and because they are not that mastered, they have not mastered that much the English or the mathematical language that you have to. And now that you have the computer, it is much more difficult dahil not all parts of the Philippines are electrified. Kung wala ka electricity, wala ka ring computer, wala kang power, wala ka ring magagawa tungkol doon. At baka wala ka pa ring cellphone kung walang power dun sa banda ninyo. Yon ang problema. At hindi nyo malalaman kung ano nangyayari dun sa kabilang bayan or dun sa kabilang baryo o sa ibang bansa. Hindi natin malalaman. Kaya pag hindi natin nalalaman ang isang bagay, baka yan ang ating ikamatay. Yun po ang problema. Gusto nating mabuhay, gusto nating maligaya. So, because we're going to run out of time, I will just give you 1 minute of geopolitics. In geopolitics, you have to consider, number one, your conditions in your country so that you will know what your self-national interest is all about and why food and water security is now part of our expanded national security issues. And that includes the harmony between people, humans, and nature. Because the disharmony has given us a lot of more typhoons and earthquakes and climate changes. Sabi ko nga kanina kay Doc Nars, ang tao is the most intelligent of all animals, but we are also the best destroyer of our world as it is today. Can you imagine in the olden days, in the caveman's days, walang cancer, walang tipos, walang damit. Pero kukonti ang sakit. Pero maaga lang silang namamatay. Ngayon, ang science took over, the intellect took over, medicines were modernized and evolved, and therefore people live longer. And therefore, they also have longer time to destroy the world because of disruptions, because of inventions, because most people don't see the future. If they see the future, they can always say, we have an issue, therefore we have a solution. But a solution also begs for another solution to the problem that it creates. Yon ang ibig kong sabihin. Kung kaya, kayong mga bata, the millennials especially, who need this because you are going to take over. Kaming matatanda, we are in the holding pattern to live, but you are going to inherit what we have left behind. Kaya kailangan kayo magiging mas matalino kaysa sa amin. Yun lang ang gusto kong sabihin. So, ngayong maghapon, we have come up with the identifying the problem, And that is basically what has happened to the economy of the earth, of the world, and of the Philippines in particular, because this is where we are, we cannot escape it, and the solutions that we are offering. But government has to hear us. Kung kaya kayong mga bata, especially PAIR, and the other associations in LPU that I'm advising, you know, you should also keep in mind how to voice politely your protests, how to do it peacefully, how to do it civilly, and how to do it without incurring the ire or wrong or misjudgment of the authorities.
All right. Thank you, Sir Hill, and thank you to all our guest speakers who share their knowledge and expert opinions regarding these matters. To our dear audiences, should you have any clarifications or questions regarding today's discussion, you may send them to us to our official email, lpupair@gmail.com, and sisiguraduhin namin makaka-receive ng reply.
We will reply. Yeah.
We will reply. Okay. This ends our second episode for Foolproof 101. I am Diana Capin, and this has been Foolproof 101. Remember, facts only, fools not allowed. Thank you.